All right. All right. All right, so diving right into it, guys. So experiential marketing. Let's hit that one first. What trends, what are you seeing, pros and cons? Let's dive right into it. And we'll go ladies first, so we'll start with you.
Great. So I think experience marketing rather than experiential marketing actually, is the most important element of marketing, always has been, and especially is today, in the sense of you want to get as close to the consumer as possible, as soon as possible. You want them to experience your product and your brand firsthand. And the thing that's so appealing about experience marketing is how unmediated it is. And I think we've had to rely on vast media networks, third parties, in order to communicate a brand message. Whereas today, there are increasing opportunities to actually get direct to the consumer. So I think that is really exciting. An example of that would be, I think, like the rise of sort of experience networks. So for example, being at a media agency, I'm trying to look for as many of my target audience as possible, right? Where are they congregating? And thankfully, a lot of them are congregating on what I would call experience platforms, such as Airbnb, in droves for long periods of time and repeatedly. So for me, the new sort of media platforms, if you will, are these kind of experience platforms where we can get more direct to the consumer.
So you're actually fairly advanced in experiential marketing, but like some of the people out there are startups and trying to kind of dive into it and see how that affects their business. What advice would you have from the newcomer in the industry?
Jeez. When we started our company, there really wasn't, experiential really didn't exist about 6 years ago, especially in media buying and marketing. And we used to kind of be at the bottom of the pyramid of all marketing. So people they'd spend money on banner ads, they would spend money on their commercials, they would spend money on events, and then maybe they would have a few extra dollars for something cool or some kind of immersive experience. Now, it's kind of flipped, where when experiential comes into the equation for big brands like Airbnb or Facebook's or anyone else, experiential's at the top. So I would say start thinking about holistically how you look at yourself and how you're going to hit all the other media touch points out of what you're doing, instead of just kind of being a piece of a commercial, a piece of someone else's marketing platform.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you guys go to learn? And obviously you're both.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, go ahead. Add. Go ahead.
So in a world where we're relying less on screens in order to be able to communicate a brand or marketing message, right? People are spending a lot less time watching TV, essentially. Brands need to think about who they are when they don't have a screen to cling to or a screen to hide behind. If your brand is a person, a brand can, your brand, what is your brand personality and your brand character? How does your brand behave in different scenarios? What is your brand experience? What are you trying to communicate? I think it's helpful to sort of personify your company and your brand and think about how it would behave in different contexts. So that's one of the things that I would suggest.
Where do you guys go? You're two experts in the area, but where do you go to learn more and get better information about these areas? Like any certain topics? I mean, I know the media is like right here, so you can give some shout outs if you want, but like what are some sources, blogs, whatever, like where do you kind of educate yourself? Or it could be just in one-on-one interaction. I just want to kind of give them insight on how you guys become as smart as you are in the space.
I think for me and for us, I think it's who you surround yourself with. And for us at our company, we're about 40 people right now. And everyone there is pretty diverse in their backgrounds. They're all a little bit of a unicorn in what they do. And we get out a lot. And especially living in New York City, getting out and going to a lot of culturally relevant institutions, a lot of events, things like that, conferences are good, rather than, I mean, I can list like 5 or 6 websites we go to, but we don't really do that. It's more like in the mornings, our water cooler talk is about like, hey, what did you do last night? What thing was happening, or where did you travel to?
Yeah, and I'd say it's, if you want to learn about experiences, you need to experience them yourself. And I think I kind of go into most things with a pretty skeptical mind. And I'm but willing to be proven wrong. In fact, like, you know, delighting in being proven wrong. So, for example, went to Jump Into the Light, which is an arts VR exhibit that's going on in New York right now. And I'm quite sort of skeptical of VR generally, but in experiencing how a number of different artists have interpreted VR, I can now see a couple of different use cases where I'm like, I buy that. So for example, I think that VR in some cases can actually substitute a real world experience and in fact make it better, or, you know, enable you to experience something that you have never and would never experience. So for example, in fact, I still haven't experienced it because I couldn't do it. This is how powerful it was. One of the experiences was walking the plank and basically falling into an abyss, like jumping into an abyss, and I just couldn't do it. So even though I knew I was wearing a VR headset, so I was like, you know, respect. You know, you have to have some respect. And then the other use case was, I think, like trying before you buy. So sort of a precursor to the actual experience that you're thinking about doing. I actually went on a trip to the Arctic Circle on a ski touring expedition last week. And I have to say, I mean, I absolutely loved it. It's one of the best experiences of my life, but I could have done with a VR like sampling experience on the first day, which would have meant that I wouldn't have held everybody else back quite so much on day one because I would have known what the experience was going to be like. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there are those two use cases that I've discovered through putting myself, you know, in a situation where I got to experience things. And I think it's like, it's the most interesting is on the fringe. Like, who are the artists, who are the innovators, who are the tinkerers that are playing with a new type of technology or a new type of experience? And I think that's where you find the most inspiration.
That's awesome. And so you, obviously this was a great last year too for you. You had the Times buy you for VR capabilities, which is, let's give him a round of applause. Like, the Times buying you for virtual reality is pretty, you didn't know you were getting that, did you? Like, he gets a little red there, but tell us about that, and tell us about the, you know, the kind of going through the process. And I mean, that's a huge thing to have the Times buy you for VR capabilities, and give us a little background behind that story, and then also the future, how you see, you know, she mentioned being skeptical of VR. Go in and kind of answer that. Should we all be skeptical? So.
Sure. So, I mean, at Fake Love, we've been working with the Times for at least a year on mostly VR stuff, mostly 360 video, that kind of thing. But as we started talking to the Times, we realized that there was a bigger thing happening, which was all of experiential, which to us is AR, VR, AI, innovation design, feature design, and that world. And the Times is really looking to stay at the forefront of those things. And so we had a lot of good conversations, and obviously they worked. Since acquisition, we've been slowly building or rebuilding all of the New York Times advertising department to look at innovation in a new way. And the way that we look at innovation at Fake Love, and actually this is the way that the Times is looking at it, and also one of the reasons why we sold is it's more on the story side. So we never approach anything with a tech in mind. We never say this is going to be VR, this is going to be AR, this is going to be a giant robot, you know, walking down the street. We approach things with what the story we want to tell is. We remove the word user, and we make everyone a creator. And I think for us, as we approach that, especially with New York Times, which is all of journalism, and working with writers and things like that, we come out with some really amazing stories to tell. And then we'll stick on what the experience is to that. Maybe it's VR now, maybe it's AR, which we're doing a lot of, maybe it's a bot, chatbot, I don't know.
Awesome.
So,
well, go ahead.
Go for it.
Samsung, who is my client, like we have a big partnership with the New York Times, and a way to evolve that is like, how do we make that partnership more experiential? And by that meaning more immersive and more three-dimensional. So I think that when it comes to media partnerships, as I kind of said at the beginning, it's like, how do we get as unmediated as possible? How do we get as close to the consumer as directly as possible? Leveraging you know, all the equity and the context that the media company and the brand that you're partnering with can offer you.
That's awesome. I wanted to leave some time here. Does anybody have some questions right now? I wanted to see at least there were some hands raised at all. Anybody want to raise their hand? Don't be shy. I've got another question, but just be thinking about it. And I think we've got a sound box or something to throw around with a mic if we have it out here. But one of my questions is like chatbots and AI. Like, obviously, I mean, we're talking like we've hit at least 5 buzzwords, and we continuously hit them. But for me, where do you see the industry going with that, with AI just in general? Like for me, a lot of times I'm somewhat skeptical in the same way, is that people say it's further than it is. Some people, and then you go and tour Google or someplace like that, and you're like, well, no, we're right there. And so, where's your vision of at least the next 2 to 5 years of where AI is?
So I think AI is just sort of something in the background that's just a necessity that we're not going to not see, which is going to just make everything that we do smarter. And it should get, everything we do should get smarter. Like there's nothing worse than a dumb chatbot, right? There's absolutely nothing worse than that. They're just not smart enough still. I did one of the Sony pictures about a year and a half, 2 years ago now. And it was actually, it was smart because it employed AI. And it was fun and it was engaging and people stuck with it. We turned a character in a movie, in the Goosebumps movie, into a friend. And actually, I think the potential there is you take something that's a flat piece of content, which is a movie. How do you get people into the movie? Don't just show them a trailer. Like, why don't you get them immersed in the characters? So again, like, think about how you can get your brand to jump up from behind the screen. Like, what are the new ways, what are the new platforms and technologies that you can take advantage of to make your brand and the elements and the assets of your brand, bring your brand's assets to life in a way that you can build a relationship with your consumer and get them excited, not just as a preamble and a precursor to the movie in this case itself, but as a franchise, like build out your brand assets by taking advantage of all these different technologies and platforms in order to broaden your reach and broaden the scope of what it is that you are putting forward.
That's awesome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, whatever technology it is, and we are working a lot with Alexa and a bunch of different AI things right now, is if it's going to work at an event or a large-scale installation that we do globally. So any new tech that comes along, our big concern is that, if a client says, hey, we want to do some cool AI at this art installation in Chicago, we'll say, cool, is it going to work for 5 days at this thing? Is AI there yet for that? No. Is some of that going to be smoke and mirrors for a big event? For doing a big IoT event or anything like that? Probably. But it's getting there. I mean, we're working with a bunch of chatbots right now for like some different entertainment properties, which are a lot of fun to do. And those are a lot simpler, where if you do like a Twitter bot or something like that. But I think what'll be interesting for us is retail in the next few years, and especially living in bigger cities like New York and more walking cities, and what that means when you're walking by a store and it knows who you are and knows everything about you, and it's telling you there's a sale and all the Blade Runner things that we want to see now, and what that means for experiential in itself. I think that's going to be huge. I don't think it's that far off, though.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, questions. Come on. I will buy a drink for the first person who. Oh, look at you. Like I said, raise your hand, not like stand up. You're shy. But yeah, what's your name first off?
My name is Catherine.
Catherine, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm wondering what your.
Yikes.
Here. I'm just gonna come out and hang out with you. All right, what are you wondering?
I'm wondering what your companies are currently doing to engage with your customers inside of text messaging other than chatbots.
What are your companies doing to engage with your customers inside of text messaging? So, how are you connecting with them?
I think that depends on for me, it depends on the experience. A lot of stuff that we do involves influencers, and they involve, obviously, like for us, especially since we live in experiential, it's a small event or whatever we're doing, maybe 500 to 1,000 people, and it has to get out there. Otherwise, it didn't happen. So a lot of times that involves some kind of really amazing, fancy photo opportunity that will start to send texts out to you and your friends with the photos. A lot of times that does involve a little bit of a bot scenario. I think it just depends on the creative. And a lot of our stuff does involve influencers. So for example, New York Times acquired this influencer network called Hello Society last March, and we work a lot with them. And so we'll make sure that at a lot of the big installations and activations we do, that word is getting out, and that will involve text, but also that will involve Snapchat and everything else.
That's awesome. Cool. Any other, we're gonna wrap one more question. You wanna stand up? Yeah, here. I can kind of hear you, go ahead. Yeah.
What social media platform would you say provides the best representation of your brand to your customers, and how does that social media platform provide the best experience for them?
So I think it really depends. So repeat the question. What social media platform?
Yeah. So like, what social
Yeah.
media platform do you think provides the best experience for your customers, and how do you tell your story on that social media platform?
Okay.
That's basically what I
Yeah.
want to get
So
to.
I think it really depends on what it is that you're trying to sell, who it is you're trying to sell to, and the message that you're trying to communicate. So in the case of Samsung, they've got all sorts of different devices, lots of different electronics. One of the things they have is a fridge with a camera inside it. So what we want to communicate is that there's this awesome smart fridge with a camera inside it where you can remotely check to see what ingredients you have in your fridge, so that when you go out shopping, you can only, you can just buy the things that you need to buy and be inspired by what's in your fridge to know what to make. So in that case, that might lead us to partnership with Pinterest, which is all around inspiration, knowing your tastes, being able to provide meaningful and useful recommendations to fulfill that experience. However, to promote a phone to a completely different audience, it will be a different medium, it will be a different platform. So I think it really depends on the specifics of your brief and and your objective.
Yeah, and to add to that, a big thing for us, and it's been increasing over the past few years, is partnerships. So for us, like when we do a large activation, or even a small one, or even a virtual one, we'll start to actually talk to people at Instagram or talk to people at Spotify and those companies and be like, hey, do you want to partner with us on this thing? And let's figure out something new and amazing to do together with this other brand. Instead of saying, hey, let's just have a bunch of people here doing Facebook Live or whatever is hot right now. We find that it just gets out there better, and it's just more better,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think involving a third party to sort of change it up and three-dimensionalize the experience for the consumer and make it more useful and valuable is great. I was talking about this, the best experiential thing that's happened to me, and this isn't necessarily about social anymore, but I'm just riffing, is everyone familiar with Alfred, which is that home butler service where they kind of it's an app and you write your shopping list and they fill your fridge and that kind of thing. Anyway, I use that service, and one day I came home and I had all these Perrier samples in my fridge, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And it wasn't complete. I was a bit like, oh, that's a bit of a liberty, putting things in my fridge that I didn't order. But they knew I had a soda stream, so they knew I liked sparkling water, and they very sort of tastefully with a little note kind of said, we thought you might want to try this. And that was just an incredible experience for me, because I got to try new flavors that didn't exist. And Perrier, through this platform of Alfred, which I would argue is one of these kind of new experience networks, became that sort of direct-to-consumer platform that enables you to bypass, as a brand, as a CPG brand in this case, everything, like retailers. And you've probably seen in the press this week, CPG companies are really struggling because they're getting deprioritized at retail, and they're losing, their priority positions. So I think these new experience platforms are enabling brands to get right to the consumer and to the right consumer in the right context.
That's awesome. What was your name, by the way? All right, thanks for the question, man. All right, well, we're wrapped up here. Thanks for having us, and
Thank you.
yeah, we'll move on to the next one. There you go. Give him a round of applause.